Viewer, Bangladesh is a ticking time bomb and India must stop pretending otherwise. What we are watching across the border in the last 10 to 11 days is not random unrest. It is organized hostility directed against India. Open anti-India slogans, protesters burning Indian symbols, political actors of the ruling dispensation like the National Citizens Party in Dhaka fanning flames instead of trying to calm people down. And all of this happening in a country that shares one of India's most sensitive borders, right next to our northeast, just before big elections in two big eastern states, that is Bengal and Assam. This is a signal that we cannot ignore. Radical Islamist protesters have forced India to shut 2 of 5 visa centers in Bangladesh, threatening violence. The danger is twofold. First, internal chaos in Bangladesh is increasingly being redirected outward towards India to hide their own complete lack of any structures. Second, this unrest is being normalized and legitimized by a ragtag pseudo-government that is virulently anti-India and increasingly comfortable with Islamist rhetoric at a time when Islamist terrorism is the single biggest global security threat. Let us be absolutely clear. Bangladesh today is openly flirting with forces that are fundamentally hostile to India. It is building bridges with Pakistan, a state sponsor of terrorism, whose entire strategic doctrine revolves around bleeding India. It is opening doors to Chinese influence, knowing fully well how Beijing uses instability, debt, and leverage to box India in across South Asia. Add to this combustible mix of radicalized street protests in Bangladesh, and you have a direct threat to India's security interests, particularly to the northeast, where even small sparks across the border can have outsized consequences, especially with looming elections. India cannot afford to be reactive here. Waiting for a major provocation would be strategic negligence, in my view, tonight. Preemptive action does not mean tanks rolling in tomorrow, like during the 1971 war. It may mean clearly escalating policy, drawing some red lines, and no longer regarding Bangladesh with the kind of rose-tinted glasses that one tends to have, considering India's role in the birth of this nation. Using diplomatic, economic, intelligence, and security levers in ways that make it unmistakably clear to Bangladesh that sustained hostility will carry unbearable costs for that country. For years, India invested in Bangladesh with patience, investment, and goodwill like a big brother. That goodwill is now being repaid with provocation and dangerous threats on a literally daily basis. The bodily integrity of our people, Indians in Bangladesh, is being threatened. The question India must ask itself is uncomfortable but necessary. When a neighbor becomes a security liability, how long do you keep pretending it is a domestic problem that Muhammad Yunus, the so-called president of that new republic, is going to have to handle? Bangladesh is no longer just Bangladesh's problem. Let me be very, very frank tonight, and this might offend some people, because ignoring this ticking time bomb would be India's biggest mistake.
India has temporarily closed its visa application centers in Rajshahi and Khulna. This a day after radical Islamist groups held protests near the Indian High Commission in Dhaka. The protest was organized under the banner of Julai Oikya, with demonstrators raising provocative demands. The closures come amid New Delhi's growing concern over what it describes as a surge in open anti-India sentiment, especially targeting India's northeastern states under Bangladesh's interim administration. Radical voices aligned with the National Citizens Party, an offshoot of the student protest that brought down the Awami League government, have issued inflammatory threats, including calls to sever India's 7 sisters and expel the Indian High Commissioner. Bangladesh's Foreign Affairs Advisor, Tauheed Hossain, has attempted to distance the government from these remarks, denying any breakdown of law and order and dismissing India's concerns. Despite repeated assurances, radical groups continue to organize anti-India demonstrations in Dhaka and elsewhere. India, meanwhile, has urged the interim government to ensure peaceful elections and restore democratic governance. In a statement, the Ministry of External Affairs said it expects Bangladesh to take all necessary measures to maintain law and order and facilitate elections that reflect the will of the people. However, the UNIS-led interim government has rejected India's advice, calling it unnecessary and unacceptable. Observers warn that radical groups backing the interim setup may attempt to delay elections by creating instability and portraying India as a scapegoat. A prolonged delay would allow the unelected interim government to remain in power beyond February, raising concerns over democratic legitimacy and regional stability. India for now continues to maintain a measured diplomatic response, even as statements emerging from Bangladesh challenge its sovereignty and territorial integrity. NDTV Bureau Report.
Give us a sense of just how dangerous and present this threat is, which we tend to ignore because Bangladesh is a neighbor and most of our focus here in India is directed towards China and Pakistan. I'm joined live now by my colleague Saurabh Gupta, Associate Editor with NDTV, an avid Bangladesh watcher who has reported from the ground as well. Saurabh, assess for us how volatile this current situation is. The images coming in from Bangladesh of protests outside Indian visa centers, outside the Indian High Commission, open threats without any consequences whatsoever. How bad is it, Saurabh?
Well, I wish I could tell you it's not so bad, but that's not the case. In fact, the situation is terrible. And this has been gradual. This is not something that's erupted overnight. This is a process. This has taken place over the last few months, largely since the UNIS government came to power. What has the UNIS government done? They have pushed for closer ties with Pakistan at the cost of the historic relationship that India and Bangladesh share. So much so that today, on 16 December, Bangladesh wants to forget India's help, India's contribution in the liberation war, in the struggle that made Bangladesh an independent nation when Pakistan was raping, murdering and committing untold atrocity on the people of Bangladesh. And we've seen top-level military visits from Pakistan to Bangladesh. We've seen the foreign minister visit. We've seen the foreign secretary of Pakistan visit. And we've also seen ISI officials visit. And this is something that's very clearly making it a situation where Pakistan's role in all of this cannot be denied. The close ties that Mohammad Yunus is pursuing with Pakistan could have a direct relationship to what is happening. Islamic radicalization is growing. They've released people who are terrorists, including Jashimuddin Rahmani. And all of this is now unfolding as this anger on the streets against India. And it's got a political motive too.
So you've just heard from Saurabh. This is a reporter and an editor's view of how bad the situation is. It is volatile to say the least because these are pictures from just yesterday and there were protests today as well. These are uncontrolled mobs of Islamist groups that are calling for violence. They're calling for violent actions against the the High Commissioner in Dhaka. These are people calling for actions that would harm the sovereignty of India. These are people who are completely out of control, and this is way beyond anyone saying that these are democratic protests and people expressing their feelings. That is complete rubbish tonight. That may have been true in August last year. It is no longer true at this point of time. Bangladesh should have been able to settle by now. It still has not done that, and it is spiraling into absolute chaos, and India needs to take note. Let's hear from the experts tonight. Veena Sikri, former High Commissioner of India to Bangladesh. Abhijit Iyer Mitra is a geopolitics and strategic affairs expert who keeps a close eye on what's happening in Bangladesh. Mohammad Kamruzaman is a senior journalist from Bangladesh. Thanks all of you for joining me tonight here on India Matters. Ambassador Sikri, I'd like to come to you first. How do you read this current situation, ma'am? It doesn't seem to be abating. People in positions of real responsibility within the new system in Bangladesh, are making open calls for violence, severing India's northeast, throwing out the Indian envoy there. How do you read this? How much of a threat is this, ma'am?
This is a very serious security challenge, and I think the genesis of it is that the events of last July, when Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina was ousted and was forced to come to India, the genesis is the support by Pakistan through the Jamaat-e-Islami. And the Jamaat-e-Islami, which is, of course, as you know, the radical Islamist organization, political party in Bangladesh, the Jamaat-e-Islami is and remains the power behind the throne. Muhammad Yunus has very little freedom of action. He is doing exactly what Pakistan and Pakistan through the Jamaat-e-Islami, or even directly, is telling him. So the point is that right from that moment on, Pakistan has been attempting to re-establish its full control in Bangladesh. And I think the activities of the Pakistan military forces, the generals, of course, ISI generals and others, their efforts to embed themselves with the Bangladesh army, put their officers in various divisions. All this is very clear of the kind of control that Pakistan wants to now establish, which is much, much more than anything they've had in the last 54 years, including trade and cargo and relaxation of visa restrictions and all those. And Pakistan has openly said that their Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba representatives are already there in Bangladesh. Yeah. The attacks on the northeast, the references to the northeast, right from day one when these processions were taking place, there was this slogan being carried, we are now going to holiday in Arunachal Pradesh, we're now going to go to Assam. So this objective of bringing in the challenges to India's sovereignty and territorial integrity in the northeast has also been part of the narrative. Yeah. And this part of the narrative is an open invitation to the Northeast Indian insurgent groups to come to Bangladesh to recreate the support that they enjoyed during the time of 2001, 2006. Right. Those are the years I was High Commissioner there, so I saw it very well at that time. And the social media already says that Paresh Barua is perhaps already in Dhaka or somewhere else. Okay. So this combined strategy that is very much being played out, and the logical conclusion of that is to prevent the Awami League, because Awami League support is still intact. If in July 2024 there was some anger, anti-incumbency anger with Sheikh Hasina,
I'll just come to that political part in just a moment, Ambassador Sikri. Let me get in a view from the ground in Dhaka. Mohammad Kamruzaman is with me. Mohammad, as a journalist, what is your view of these protests? India has been watching with concern as Bangladesh hosts Pakistani armed forces delegations, etc. As an independent viewer from the ground, how do you see this? How do you assess it, Mohammad?
Thank you very much for having me. Actually, I want to start this very briefly, I'll tell. So I hope that you will not interrupt me. Very briefly, I'll tell. Actually, you know that this country was ruled nearly 16 years by Sheikh Hasina, who is now in India. And even the second man of Awami League, Obaidul Qadir, in a public meeting told that when Awami League will fall, thousands of people will be killed on the streets. Actually, during the tenure of Sheikh Hasina, there were extrajudicial killings, enforced disappearances, and many other human rights violations. So there were discontent among the people against Awami League. But unfortunately, India, who supported us during our liberation war, and we are really grateful to India for that contribution. But problem is that the young generation who are very conscious, they are disheartened, because even after the trial, death penalty against Sheikh Hasina, even she is still there. And many Awami League leaders who are guilty of crimes against humanity, mass murders, so they are also in India. And India, most of the time, harbors the people who commit crimes here. That's why actually people are discontent. And in this, even in this report that you, in a long time, you are telling, many times you have used the word radicalism or Islamist terrorists. Actually, even the footage that you are using, there are students, there are open, very Western dress female. So there are so many university students, there are English medium students. So this narration, I think, should be amended that you are using now. Actually, the Bangladeshi people, they are very frank and very friendly. They also want to take a relationship, want to make a relationship with India. But India must acknowledge Bangladesh as an independent country, and India must stop harboring the criminals in their country, so that Bangladesh can feel safe from their closest neighbor, their biggest neighbor. That's the ground reality. And I think that in your narration that you have told and your report, there are, frankly speaking, there are some exaggeration. The ground reality is not that.
Okay. Point made, Mohammed. Abhijit, bringing you in, there are all these moving parts. There are legitimate concerns. There's the Sheikh Hasina issue that Mohammed pointed out. India's, one section of India's view is that this is not just some kind of organic anger by youth in Bangladesh. They've been weaponized, by the real power centers behind the scenes, who are, as Ambassador Sikri said, Islamists, who are openly hosting and flirting with genuine terrorist entities. So there is nothing kosher about what is going on. The question now is, we understand what's going on. What happens next? Because as Mohammed said, there is one section where there is a sentiment that has to be addressed as far as Sheikh Hasina is concerned. But what about all these threats and violence?
Look, these threats and violence just prove that the situation is simply not stable enough or legitimate enough for Sheikh Hasina to be sent back. Remember how the courts were fiddled with the moment this so-called, basically a street coup, which they want to call a revolution, happened. Thugs taking over government, threatening judges, removing them, releasing convicted terrorists, known terrorists, people who had taken part in the genocide of the Bangladeshi people themselves. All kinds of people like that were released. We should remember these people out on the streets that you're showing visuals of. They belong to a party of Razakars. These were the people who collaborated with the Pakistanis in killing their own people. Never forget that. So let us be very clear what is happening in Bangladesh. First, Sheikh Hasina will not be sent back to this puppet joke of a regime that is happening out there. It is not going to happen, full stop. Remember, this is a regime that went on trying not to hold elections. They want reform. What reform has this man done? Nothing. He wasn't even willing to hold elections till the army chief essentially put a gun to his head and forced him to call elections. Then what has this man done? He is now trying to create the classic strategy of all dictators who are losing power, a strategy of perpetual tension. He wants to aggravate the situation on the streets that forces the army out, lets him play martyr. He knows he is going to get convicted for all the misdeeds of his government in the last 1.5, 2 years. He doesn't want that. He wants political asylum. He wants the army out on the street. These are all very carefully calibrated to bring the army out on the street in some form or the other. The army, for its part, wants to avoid that. Unlike the Pakistan army, which goes around creating coups, goes on creating tension so that they can take over, the Bangladesh army is very carefully avoiding that. They're very carefully avoiding interfering in politics. They want, essentially, what Muhammad Yunus wants is some kind of a situation which gets blamed also on the Awami League, so that now the thing is, the Awami League is not going to contest the elections apparently. They will be contesting as independent. We all know exactly what's going to happen there, like happened with the Pakistan elections, where so-called independents who were actually PTI fellows were winning the election till the coverage was stopped at night, and then suddenly, the other two parties won. They're trying some kind of a game book like that out here as well.
Okay.
Let's see where this leads. I think the biggest trap that's being laid here is for the Bangladesh army. I think the Bangladesh army itself knows what is up. Muhammad Yunus is playing with fire. Let's see what happens.
Mohammed, Sheikh Hasina is not going to be sent back. There is no guarantee of her safety that she will be tried. She'll probably be lynched if she comes back to Bangladesh. Muhammad Yunus, who had promised reforms, has allowed the country to be in a state of instability and chaos where, the ruling party is allowed to issue direct threats to your neighbor, India. One has to look at both sides very carefully. One has to understand India's concerns also in this. just as India is trying to understand Bangladesh's concerns?
Thank you very much. Look, Bangladesh is an independent country that I have already mentioned, and the judicial process is going very transparently. So it's completely the internal matter of Bangladesh. It's not a matter of India. India should not be concerned about that.
India has to be concerned, Mohammed. I don't want to interrupt you, but India has to be concerned. If your politicians in the ruling dispensation are talking about the Northeast,
you should
India
be
is very concerned. My friend, out of great respect for you, but India is directly concerned with what happens in Bangladesh. Directly concerned with what happens in Bangladesh.
If you are concerned, then you should also be concerned during the human rights violation here, during the tenure of Sheikh Hasina, who was actually ruled this country with the support of India. So at that time, India should also have raised their voice when there are so many judicial killings.
Abhijit,
there are so many extrajudicial killings.
What would you say to Mohammed when he says that? What would you say?
You see, classic case of deflection that Mr. Kamruzzaman is doing. Let me explain how extradition works. India and Bangladesh have an extradition pact. Now, you don't just extradite because you have an extradition pact. What does an extradition pact say? The crime that happens in country B also has to be a crime under country A, under which the person accused can be extradited. If it is, then the extradition can proceed. But there is a second test to it. Are the functioning organs that are meant to try it going to be institutionally sound, as they are in India? All right. You remember, this is why Denmark refused to extradite that Purulia drop case, the explosive drop case guy to India, and we got very upset about it. Look, Bangladesh has a right to get upset. But the point is, Bangladeshi legal standards simply don't hold up to the institutional integrity that we come to expect in India. That is the sad reality of it. This has absolutely nothing to do with human rights, etc., whatever. Human rights violations there are also human rights violations here. Unfortunately, Bangladeshi institutions don't hold up to integrity because unlike in Bangladesh, we have not had street takeovers of power.
And the conversation changes, Mohammed, when Bangladesh talks about reform and new resurgence and a new nation, Naya Bangladesh, etc. And your country's leaders are openly hosting Pakistan, which is acknowledged as a global fountainhead of terror, a direct enemy of India, a country that sends terrorists across the border. That seems to be the priority for Bangladeshi leaders. That itself triggers an alarm here in India. If it was not about that, these things would be very different.
I think there is huge misinformation.
And you have a history
there is flow of misinformation.
That's what people are shocked about.
You should cross-check this, what you are saying now. Just may I ask you a question, please? Once upon a time, when India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, the same country, and British ruled us 190 years. There are so many misunderstandings, so many human rights violations. Did you question British for that? So you are again and again telling about Bangladesh-Pakistan relation.
But this is
Bangladesh-Pakistan relation.
This is a zero-sum game, Mohammed. This is classic diversion.
Why are
this is classic diversion. We're talking about the present right now.
It's internal matter of Bangladesh. You should respect
the
internal matter of Bangladesh.
I want to say
affairs of Bangladesh.
I want to say something which most people might find controversial, but I don't think there is anything called internal issue of Bangladesh anymore when it comes to the subcontinent, because when it comes to Indian security, there is no internal issue of Bangladesh. Anything that's happening inside Bangladesh is a direct factor as far as security in India's northeast is concerned. Ambassador Sikri, final comments from you. What is the next step? Is this a stalemate? Is it going to get worse in Bangladesh? Should India impose some costs or consequences? What are those then?
Well, I think first of all, we must remember that what your panelist, a journalist from Bangladesh, is saying is not borne out by the facts at all. He called the judicial process transparent, and this was done by judges who were, brought in by the Jamaat-e-Islami after the legally appointed judges were displaced by a mob. There's a complete mobocracy and anarchy in Bangladesh. The interim government is not authorized to do any of all this. The interim regime is only supposed to be there for 90 days and to have elections and to have a non-party party caretaker government. None of these conditions were fulfilled by the Bangladesh. Secondly, I think the whole question of saying that that they can say what they want about India, talk about Northeast India, they taking over the state, and if India says something about Bangladesh, it becomes interference in internal affairs. This is a two-way street. You must remember that, because India and Bangladesh are close neighbors. The security of what happens in India is very much affected by what has happened in Bangladesh. The way that you have been killing the minorities, and then your Muhammad Yunus says, oh, this is fake news from India. When the world is recognizing that the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Christians, the Sufis, the Ahmadiyyas have been lynched and raped and their properties taken over and their jobs again taken back by a mob. A mob surrounds the Hindu teacher and forces her to resign. So this is what is happening in Bangladesh. The way ahead, I think, is very clear. The elections must be free, fair, inclusive,
not going to happen.
and therefore the question of banning the Awami League did not arise. Bangladesh should be ashamed of itself, because similar regime change operations in Sri Lanka, Rajapaksa government brought down. The Rajapaksa government party was fully allowed to take part in the elections. In Nepal, regime change operation, Oli government brought down. The Oli, their party is fully allowed to take part in the elections happening in March. So why is it in Bangladesh you want to ban parties and you want to pretend that you're democratic when actually you're not? This is, and unless the elections are free, fair, inclusive, and credible, they will not be accepted by the people of Bangladesh, and there will be continued instability and insecurity. And that is what.
I think that's a very, very important point. I am just very skeptical about whether elections can be free and fair. Certainly not in the current circumstances.
They have to ensure they are. That is going to be
Bangladesh is a country in free fall. Mobocracy is the word that you used, Ambassador Sikri, and I think that applies very clearly. So there is not just a trust deficit, there is a security deficit right now between India and Bangladesh, and it's not something that we can ignore. Like I said, there are elections happening in Bengal, in Assam in the next few months. A small little spark can trigger big things. Mohammad, Ambassador Sikri, and Abhijit, pleasure. Thank you very much for being with me tonight on India Matters.